The smart money's on St. Nick, but you don't have to take a jumbo stoops down into the swamp to find some potential heirs to the throne. We rank SEC coaches right here at Mark Rogers TV. Next. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, delivering for you the best discussion, debate, and analysis of college football. Please check out the videos. Then I think you'll want to subscribe once you see what we deliver each and every day for you, the hardcore and the smart fan. We have run through the other four conferences, ranking the coaches. We make our last stop at the SEC, and then after we're done with this, we are going to rank the top 10 coaches in college football. All right, let's run through the SEC, and of course, we want to hear from you. Please provide your comments, your rankings, and your criticism of what I'm delivering here. All right, at number 14, we've got Chad Morris of Arkansas. It was a rough go that first year at 2-10, no wins in the SEC, 0 for 8. They not only lost 8 games in the SEC and only 2 wins outside of the conference against an extremely weak schedule. Arkansas is accountable for the only 2 losses for the entire conference against the group of 5. And it wasn't exactly UCF and Boise State. It was North Texas. North Texas. They lost to North Texas by 27 points, and Colorado State as well. All right. Colorado State went 3-9. In the group of 5. All right, Chad Morris did a nice job at SMU. He took over a 1-11 team, and they went 7-5 his third year. So Chad Morris might be capable, but right now, based on the first-year performance, and that's all we can go on, I am ranking coaches as it stands right now. There is very little, I'm not going to say no projection, but very little projection, and legacy counts very little as well. We're talking about right now, who would I hire right now based on their credentials and based on what they bring to the table right now. Chad Morris, number 14 in the SEC. At number 13, we've got... Yes, we're going with Joe Moorhead of Mississippi State, 8-5, 4-4 in his first year as a Power 5 or FBS football coach after coming down from Penn State where he was the offensive coordinator. All right, this team was a dark horse in the SEC Western Division. Very few people thought that they could really challenge Alabama, but thought if anyone could emerge amongst LSU, Texas A&M, and Auburn, it could be Mississippi State based on that stellar defense. And they didn't come anywhere close. They lost their bowl game to Iowa. They underachieved last year at 8-5. I thought this could have been a 9, 10, 11-win team. The offense did not overwhelm anyone. They had very poor performances against the likes of Kentucky and Florida in particular. Also, the defense won the games that we talk about against the likes of Auburn in particular. So, man, they scored 7 against Kentucky, 6 against Florida, 3 against LSU, and were shut out against Alabama. The defense held over from the Dan Mullen era, won these games. So Joe Moorhead proved little in his first stop as a head coach, and it's only year 1, so certainly is time, and it was nothing close to a disaster, but considering what he was able to produce on offense and the track record and the reputation he had on that side of the ball coming from Penn State, and even Penn State defenders who have moved on to the NFL said, Mississippi State, you've got the guy. This guy is going to change the offense. He is going to be a great head coach. We did not see it. We saw a 7-point favorite in the Outback Bowl lose to Iowa. So Joe Moorhead at number 13 based on his first-year performance at Mississippi State. At number 12, as I'm all over the place with my notes, we got Derek Mason of Vanderbilt. Now, right out of the gate, I felt as though he looked like a deer in headlights overwhelmed by the job. I no longer think that. Coming into the position from Stanford, where he was a stellar defensive coordinator, taking over an SEC program that had gone 9-4 back-to-back years under James Franklin. And what happens with Derek Mason? 5 straight losing seasons. In the first year, again, deer in headlights. They lost at Temple, didn't score an offensive touchdown. They looked deplorable early. Okay, in recent years, he's come back and brought this program to a place where you would expect Vanderbilt football to be, on the cusp of postseason play, barely getting into postseason play. 6-7 twice. They had a bowl loss the last 2 years. At least they played well against Baylor. 2 years ago, they were embarrassed by NC State. All right, in 2018 in particular, if you look at Vandy's performance, we can't just look at the results, but the performance. What does the program look like? Well, they didn't get embarrassed. That's key. They are competing in games. They beat Ole Miss and Tennessee. They had close losses against Kentucky and Florida and also Missouri. Those were close games against those teams. He's transformed the offense from a run-first, Ralph Webb, punch him in the gut, right up the middle off tackle, to pass efficiency. Now we'll see if he can transform that in the future without Kyle Shermer. That could be difficult. Of course, he helped build the Sanford program along with David Shaw, and before that, Jim Harbaugh, into a Pac-12 power, a Rose Bowl champion with defense. And the Vandy defenses, though, were really good under James Franklin, have been less than stellar, have been mediocre under Derek Mason. So much like Joe Moorhead, Derek Mason, with a longer time to develop that side of the football, he's taken his calling card and he has not come through. So we've got Derek Mason at number 12 from Vanderbilt, who has just received a contract extension. All right, at number 11, Matt Luke of Ole Miss. Okay, after 5 years as the offensive line coach, co-offensive coordinator, he took over a mess. He had some talent on the field, some talent on the roster, but nothing close to what Ole Miss had under Hugh Freeze in 2012, 13, and 14, and 15. Of course, Hugh Freeze left some exceptional speed. That we saw that at the NFL Combine at both wide receiver and defensive back, but otherwise it was a depleted roster. And despite his inexperience, he knows the culture. He played at Ole Miss. He's been entrenched in the program. He loves the program. Sure, he made some mistakes, but at the same time, he was the right fit to save this program because he's invested and he knows what happened and what's going on there. 6-6, 3-5 this past season after 5-7, 1-7. Invert that. 6-6, 3-5 his first campaign, coming off 5-7, 1-7 in the SEC. Close losses against Vanderbilt and South Carolina, where otherwise they got outclassed by everybody else in the SEC. Impressive performance in the opener against Texas Tech, and Cliff Kingsbury winning 47-27. The 2019 team is going to be depleted in terms of the roster. Again, this is not an SEC Western Division challenger in regards to roster talent or depth, but he did bring in the number 22 class in the nation. All right, that doesn't compare to the Alabamas and LSUs and Texas A&Ms, but still number 22 in the nation. Postseason eligible, provides another incentive, motivation, another bullet point on the speech this summer and into the fall for Matt Luke in driving this Ole Miss program from the bottom of the barrel near it, only being held up by Arkansas, the bottom of the SEC Western Division. SEC coaches rankings here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Number 11 is Matt Luke of Ole Miss. All right, at number 10, the first-year performance was not great, but I like Jeremy Pruitt at Tennessee at number 10. 5-7 overall, 2-6 in the SEC. Two really good wins when you think about it. They beat Auburn. Auburn finished 8-5 against a brutal schedule. And Kentucky. I know people weren't impressed with Kentucky, but they were still one of the 10 best teams in the country. Finished 10-3, beat Penn State, beat some other really good teams. But a bad finish down the stretch. They did not close. They lost to Missouri 50-17. 38-13 loss to Vanderbilt in the close to miss the bowl game. This guy's an exceptional recruiter. That's his calling card. He comes into the program much like Moorhead on offense, Mason on defense, Jeremy Pruitt recruiting, where he proved his value at Alabama, Florida State, and Georgia. Jeremy Pruitt at number 10 in the SEC from Tennessee. All right, 9th best coach in the conference right now is South Carolina's Will Muschamp. 22-17 in Columbia, 12-12 in the SEC. We know he's defensive-minded. We know that he has built some of the best defenses in college football over the last 15 years at stops like LSU, Auburn, and Texas. So he's an exceptional defensive coordinator. Is he a head coach? Well, yes, he can run a program. Can he run it well? Can he challenge in the East? That has yet to be proven. It looked like, based on coming in and going 3-9, 6-7, 9-4, that the trajectory was obvious, 3 wins to 6-9. But then last year, and anytime you build a program to that degree, where you're going 8-4 in the regular season after going 3-9 just 2 years prior, the next step is more difficult than the other steps, because then you have to start beating the big boys. And Will Muschamp has not been able to do that. They went 7-6. It was a disappointment. They flattened out in the bowl game, were shut out by Virginia. Poor performance with all that time to prepare with a veteran quarterback in Jake Bentley. We know what happened at Florida. Hopefully he's learned from that. We've seen some indications, but not completely. He had the one big season in 2012 in Gainesville. Otherwise, big disappointment with the Florida Gators. He's bringing in top 20 recruiting classes, but again, is that enough to keep up with Georgia and Florida and what Jeremy Pruitt is starting at Tennessee? And also, not only to catch up with Georgia and Florida, but hold off, yes, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Missouri. He's a solid coach, but is he a really good one? This is going to be a key season for Will Muschamp against a brutal schedule, maybe the toughest in the nation in 2019. We got Will Muschamp at number 9 in our coaches' rankings in the SEC. All right, at number 8, we stop at another Columbia, Missouri, and Barry Odom. All right, outside of Vanderbilt, this is probably the most difficult coaching job in the SEC. No real geographical ties to the wealth of talent in the conference. Gary Pinkel, of course, was a mastermind, did a great job, knew exactly what he needed to do, but that was a different situation in the Big 12. Sure, he transitioned very well to the SEC Eastern Division, but he had that program built in the Big 12, and he had certain pipelines, and Barry Odom is somewhat adjusting to life in the SEC. Of course, Pinkel won back-to-back division titles in 13 and 14, and then the program came back to where many people thought it would be against an SEC schedule in 2015 and 16. They got off to a bad start in 2017. Then Barry Odom made his big speech, and they turned it around. Well, they did turn it around, but they were helped out by a front-loaded schedule. So they made hay against a bad schedule late, but to Barry Odom's credit, he got them to postseason play in 2017 unexpectedly. Now, the last 2 years, yeah, they made it to postseason play at 7-5 and 8-4 going into the bowl game. But as a 3-point favorite against Texas and time to prepare, 9-point favorite against Oklahoma State, 6 weeks to prepare, they didn't look good in either game. They were beat by double digits in both games against Texas and Oklahoma State. So we need Barry Odom to show us that he can prepare a team for a bowl game, a big game at Missouri. But otherwise doing a nice job, generally doing what Gary Pinkel did at Mizzou, although Pinkel would have those spike years where he would go from a lot of 7-5s at 8-4s to boom, 10-2, 11-1. We'll see if Barry Odom's able to follow suit. Our 8th-ranked coach in the SEC is Missouri's Barry Odom. At number 7, we go to the Bayou and Ed Orgeron, LSU, who just received a contract extension of 2 years and a $500,000 raise. All right. We should probably hold a contest here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, for the best Coach O impersonation. It's a great voice. It's a great character. And if LSU was looking to replace a character in Les Miles, they hit the nail on the head with Coach O. He's 25-9 at 15-7 at LSU. Considering the talent, that's not overwhelming. It's not a disaster, but it's not overwhelming. But it's better than Les Miles' 34-game stretch to close his LSU career. Edo has obviously learned a lot from his stay at Ole Miss, which was close to a disaster, and then going to USC and winning 6 of 7 down the stretch at Southern California. Wasn't able to keep the job on an interim basis there. Edo, LSU, the jury's still out. Can he compete seriously for an SEC championship? Obviously, he's got to get by Alabama, and now you got Jimbo Fisher in the division. But that's the task at LSU. And Ed Orgeron to date has been solid, very good. Top 10 finish this past year. We'll see if he's a championship caliber coach in the next few years. All right, we move on to number 6, a guy who has won the SEC Western Division twice, but also had a lot of disappointing campaigns, and that's Gus Malzahn on the Plains at Auburn. 53-27, 28-20 in the SEC. So he's only 28-20 in the SEC. At a place like Auburn, winning, what is that, like 58% of his games? That's not good enough. All right, he's going to take back the offense, and that's really, we speak of calling cards with Moorhead and Mason and Muschamp. This is a calling card here. Offense, play calling, matchups, scheme on that side of the ball with Gus Malzahn, and he's going to take it back over. Very interesting run at Auburn, where he comes in after masterminding an offense to an SEC and national championship in 2010. He makes and is the owner of the greatest turnaround that I can think of in the history of college football. From 0-8 in the SEC and 3-9 overall to within seconds of winning the BCS championship and winning the toughest conference in the nation. But then after that, there were huge expectations that he did not fulfill, that he fulfilled with a lot of 8-5 finishes. Then in 2017, they have the big 3-week stretch against Alabama, number 1, and another number 1 team in Georgia. They win both of those games. He gets a contract extension. Then they lose by 3 touchdowns in the conference championship game and lose somewhat embarrassingly to UCF in the Peach Bowl. Okay, they come back in 2018. Auburn was a good team. They went 8-5. They blew out Purdue. They won some other significant games in conference. They beat Texas A&M in particular. They had a difficult schedule. Obviously, they play in the toughest division in the nation and always have to face Georgia on the other side. But a loss to Tennessee, not good. Not competing with Alabama, giving up over 50 points in that game against the Tide in the Iron Bowl. 3-5 finish in the SEC. Fortunately, they won over Washington. They beat Purdue, so they finished well out of conference to salvage the look of the season at 8-5. Gus Malzahn running the offense in 2019. We'll see what he has to say about the race for the SEC Western Division title here in 2019. Number 6 in our coaches' rankings in the SEC. All right, let's go to the top 5 and Kentucky's Mark Stoops. The bottom line numbers in the Commonwealth are not great, 36-39, 17-31. But if you understand Kentucky football and where it's been and where it's failed to go, Mark Stoops has done a fine job. Now, it's taken him some time. You know, he took over a program that was winning 2 and 3 games, and he won 2 games his first year. So he's taken step by step, 5 wins, 6 wins, finally get to a bowl game, finally get to another bowl game. Barely getting to bowl games. Finally won a bowl game. Then, boom, last year. Tremendous defensive showing out of this Kentucky team. Now, they lost all that talent. The recruiting has been very good at Kentucky, not by SEC standards in comparison to Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, but top 20 to 25 class is something that Joker Phillips and others could not do at Kentucky. They were bringing in top 40 to 60 classes. Mark Stoops has gone north to Ohio in particular and brought down first-rate talent to be able to compete in the SEC Eastern Division. All right, again, 8-5 2 years ago, followed by 10-3 in a top 10 finish and impressive showings against the likes of Florida, Texas A&M, even in a loss on the road in overtime, and, of course, beating Penn State and beating some good teams. Kentucky, impressive season. Mark Stoops, can he back it up and do it again, though, after delivering the best football season Kentucky has seen since 1977? All right, let's go to number 4 in Kirby Smart of Georgia. First-time head coach. And I would think that there's no question that Georgia fans would be extremely happy with the state of the Georgia program right now versus 3 years ago. Mark Richt finished in the top 10. Some people might be surprised by this, 8 times in 15 years. So the Georgia program was extremely good. He was winning plus 75% of his games. But Kirby Smart has decidedly taken that to the near or elite level. Clemson, Alabama, Then you got to put Georgia right in there with a mix of Ohio State and Oklahoma. They are right there near the elite of college football, and he's done it with flat-out recruiting like a maniac. Brought in some of the best classes in the history of recruiting records. All right, what's there not to like? They've won the SEC East 2 consecutive years, haven't lost to a team in the division. We're on the brink of a national championship. Overtime. They're in overtime to win a national championship in his second season. They get back to the SEC championship game. They have a lead late. They blow it. Okay, so everything to like except in-game management. But hey, first-time head coach, only 3 seasons in, maybe he gets that corrected. That's what he's going to have to do to take that next step to the truly Dabo Saban status. Number 4 coach in the SEC is Kirby Smart of Georgia. All right, at number 3, we got Dan Mullen of Florida. These are the records for Mississippi State football before Dan Mullen arrived. 3-8, 3-9, 2-10, 3-8, 3-8, 3-9, 8-5, 4-8. That's atrocious. 7 of 8 losing seasons, 36 games under 500. With Mullen, 25 games over 500. Ranked in the final top 25 3 times. The recruiting improved to top 20 in the nation. Okay. And that came after mentoring the likes of Alex Smith at Utah and Tim Tebow at Florida. He seems to be the perfect fit at Florida. He knows the landscape, he knows the territory, the recruiting, he knows the culture, the brand, the university, everything involved. It has seemed like the perfect fit. He raised the bar. He raised the level of play. They had the one misstep against Missouri. That's really the only game that they looked bad, unprepared. That's going to happen over 12 games when you're building a program. But even in losing to Georgia by nearly 20 points, that was a really good game deep into the third quarter. Florida played really well, 10-3. Again, this seems to be a perfect fit, and Dan Mullen, based on the recruiting, seems to have it rolling in Gainesville. Our number 3 coach in the SEC is Dan Mullen. Number 2, we go to a national championship winning coach, Jimbo Fisher. Okay, there could be an argument made, and I would certainly understand it and respect it, for Kirby Smart or Mullen over Fisher. But Jimbo's proven. And it's easy to say, Florida State, anybody can go there and win. Well, is Willie Taggart winning? Well, not the first year. Okay, how about Bobby Bowden, his last handful of seasons? Bobby Bowden, his last 5 or 6 seasons at Florida State, went 38-27. Jimbo Fisher took over Florida State and went 83-23, 48-16 in the ACC. Now, yeah, Dabo caught him and passed him right at the end, but he dominated at Florida State. Won a national championship, won the ACC 3 times, finished in the top 10 4 times, and even as late as 2016, they won the Orange Bowl and finished 8th in the country at 10-3. Really, they had the one bad season, and he lost something there. It was just not a good situation. The relationship soured, and he just wasn't invested and lost control, lost his quarterback in game 1. The one bad season at Florida State. He comes to Texas A&M, and after all those 5-0 starts under Kevin Sumlin after Johnny Manziel left, and disappointing finishes at 8-5, what did Jimbo Fisher do? That team competed better than they have in years. They took Clemson to the wire. They beat LSU. They throttled North Carolina State, arguably the second best team in the ACC, throttled them 52-13. They competed better against Alabama than any team in the regular season. Anybody better than LSU, better than Mississippi State. That was at least a game. It was a one-score game in the third quarter. Jimbo Fisher doing work at Texas A&M, bringing in top 5 recruiting classes. He's only 1 season in. We've got him ranked at number 2 in the SEC. And at number 1, do I even need to say anything past this? You pretty much know the numbers. 5 national championships at Alabama, 6 overall. 8 SEC championships total, 6 at Alabama. Think about this. Alabama has finished in the top 10 11 straight seasons. Nick Saban's worst season since his inaugural season at Alabama, his worst season. They went 10-3. They finished in the top 10, and they annihilated a Michigan State team that shared the Big Ten championship, 49-7 in the Capital One Bowl. That's the worst. That's the bottom. He has gone 79-9 in what has largely, for most of this period, been the best conference in college football. 79-9 since 2008. He went to LSU. LSU fans or people that follow college football that aren't that old, don't remember back in the 80s and 90s, look up LSU's records before Nick Saban got there. A lot of 7-4s, 4-7s, all over the place. This was barely over 500 football for LSU for a span of 15 to 20 years. And Nick Saban instantly, bam, year 2, SEC champions. Year 5, national championship. Hands it over to Les Miles. Goes to Alabama. Alabama's records before Nick Saban got there. 46-40 since the year 2000. Alabama, people, went 46-40. Nick Saban then cleans house. And I've got the LSU record here. Since 1989, from 1989 until Nick Saban arrived in 2000, LSU, I gave them too much credit. I did the research. Not over 500. 58-65. LSU. Nick Saban's the best coach in college football. If we look at track record, it's not even close. And arguably the best in history. I have named him the best in history in my rankings. We're going to match up, though, because we're talking right now, 2019, March of 2019. Who's the best? Nick Saban clearly in the SEC. But next, now that we've completed all 5 conferences, the top 10 coaches in college football. Dabo, Saban. That's what it comes down to. Everybody else just fills the slots. We'll be back with that ranking right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. And please check out our SEC channel with SG1 Sports and the rest of our postings as we continue to get you set for 2019.